This time, Eric Weinstein asks about a framework called VPEC-T, which we've found very useful for enterprise architecture. VPEC-T is a framework developed by Nigel and Bate, which is just a set of lenses, if you like, to look into a context. VPEC-T stands for values, policies, event, content, and trust. It was originally developed in their work on the UK justice system as a whole enterprise, particularly to deal with the relationships between stakeholders, all of whom had very different views on what was actually needed in the context. One example was a clash between frontline police and prosecutors for the court. The frontline police, the one thing they wanted to do was get out on the street and catch the bad guys. The one thing they didn't want to do was, as they saw it, waste their time doing the paperwork. On the other side, the prosecutors, what they wanted and needed was the paperwork fully done, otherwise the case might well be lost at court just on a technicality. So they needed the paperwork fully done, all the I's dotted, the T's crossed, everything exactly correct, which is exactly what the police did not want. Now you started to see what the different values were, you could then start to look for a place where they met. And in this case, it was that both of them wanted the bad guys kept off the street. So it became of interest to the police to do the paperwork, and it became of interest to the prosecutors that the police be supported in being out on the street as much as possible. So redesign the way it works such that the police get all the information that they need with the minimum of time and the minimum of effort, but is fully cross-checked such that the court prosecutors get what they need. These kind of clashes occurred all the way across the whole enterprise, including the victim support system, the courts themselves, the police, the remand group, which people before they go to trial, the detention group who are running the prisons themselves, victim support group, family support group, offender support groups, and so on. They all had different views. They all had to be brought together. By looking at values, policies, events, content, and trust, it becomes a way of understanding how all of these can be brought together to work together in a whole. The real crucial central point here is actually trust. How do we get each of the stakeholder groups to trust the other to give them what they themselves will need? So everything that we do within that space needs to be about building, maintaining, creating, supporting trust. There's a sort of parallel with 5 elements, if you're familiar with that, where we go from purpose to people to process to preparation to process to performance, which has got some similarity, because as we leave purpose, we want to know about values. As we leave people, we want to have policies that drive the preparation. The trigger from going from preparation to process is some kind of event, and we're collecting content and reviewing content inside performance. But the difference there is that those are going round. They are triggers to move to the next phase, whereas VPEC-T more properly is a set of lenses looking into the view of the space as a whole. They're related, but they're not quite the same. So it's important not to mix them up. So VPEC-T is, what are the values? What are the policies? What are the events? What are the content? And what supports trust for each of the stakeholders, the stakeholder groups, and then each of the stakeholders in relation to all of the others. Values, policies, event, content, trust. A very useful filter, a very useful framework to use in enterprise architecture.